Can go if you want. I'm just sort of my questions are going to be sort of like community and like support group kind of based. So just in general, like outside necessarily of the organization, but just in general across campus, do you feel like there's a strong Asian American community, or is it sort of like a quieted community, or what do you think as far as that's concerned? Does that make sense?
Sure, I can add on after you.
Yeah. Since I've been here for a little while, I can honestly say that the connection with Ball State and the rest of Muncie is not that great. We all know that. And Muncie it's incredibly pain in the butt. It's very diverse in its own self, but it still has its racial issues. I've faced discrimination within the community, so there's not a lot of welcome there. But as far as within the university, it's very much its own little bubble. So for me, I've had to reach out to other Asian Americans, and even some international students will come and like ask me questions like, "You have really good English. Why do you have really good English?" Because I've been here my whole life. But it's really interesting to have the interaction with them, as well as create a bond with them that they have more of a clear connection with their country and with their own culture, whereas I want to reach out to that and learn more about it. So there's a really good connection there with it. As far as it being quieted or anything, it's really interesting because when the international students do come to campus, I believe in their program, they're taught not to really branch out to Americans, which is really strange. It explains a lot because some of them will avoid other Americans or avoid getting active within certain groups or organizations, and that's why, because they're told not to. So that's one very different aspect that as students we didn't know about until just recently. That's all I have.
Not at the moment.
Why about that? What you were just saying, like them being told to not branch out. Why do you think that is? Like, do you have any idea why that might be?
I think it could be the only. That's a really good question. It could be a matter that since they're coming so far to a foreign country, it could be they need to focus on their academics, which is they're paying extremely large amounts of money to be here. They might as well get a really good education out of it. It could also be for their own kind of personal safety. As I've faced discrimination, I've never had a huge issue with it, more like verbal debates with individuals. But for them, if they stay within their own special group, their own little culture, then they're much more likely to be protected. And it could be a psychological aspect of what the programmers want, but isn't necessarily going to benefit those students. It can also be for their own personal safety, physical safety, since we do have some issues that arise on campus, like assaults and whatnot. So those could be two very strong things that they look at when they say, okay, so you're coming overseas, this is what you need to do to survive. Would be one aspect.
I know you said that you faced discrimination. Can you guys talk a little bit more about like your own personal experience, not getting into too much detail, but just your personal experience with discrimination and anything that you've faced just throughout your whole life?
Do you have any? Since I opened up the can of worms. Yeah. It hasn't really been a problem since I think my junior year, and there was this random older gentleman who's obviously a citizen of Muncie who was biking on campus, and he asked if I was from China, and then he called me a freak and told me to go back home. Which, one, I'm not Chinese, but I don't expect him to know that. And two, I thought it was really rude, so I started yelling at him in response. But that really fired me up as far as, you can't approach random people and say that. That's just rude. But it was also a matter of he was very uneducated because he didn't use any racial slurs. He just called me a freak and a couple other names. So very, very uneducated. So I think that's a good example of what happens when people don't open up to diversity and are not well exposed to it, especially in the Muncie community. I think the only other discrimination I faced, it came up in our interracial panel. A young man asked a question about sexual fetishes, and that does come up too, especially with like men or anything, how they view Asian women, and that's been an issue as far as how white males will look at Asian women in a certain aspect, and I've had that issue as well.
So frustrating.
been interesting because in one aspect it's good because now I know how to protect myself as far as civil rights and women's rights. But in another way, it's also really annoying because you don't know if this individual's they like you for who you are and everything, or if they're just interested in you for certain other reasons, which are not positive.
Oh, I wouldn't say I've actually never experienced discrimination like that. I've had a couple of things said, like from high school, I was in a musical with my sister, and it was a dance-heavy musical, and a lot of the senior citizens for our senior citizen show, you know, they were baby boomers. They had a lot of terms that aren't used today, and and I kid you not, they said this out loud. Those Orientals sure can dance, and I don't know if I saw it as a compliment. Or if I thought it was adorable because they were old. It was just it just kind of made me wonder, like, oh, Oriental, haven't heard that one in a while. So, yeah, it didn't really affect me. Kind of brushed it off. Just thought it was minuscule, but deep down, sometimes it's like that word shouldn't be used. Yeah.
We talked in our class about how people will ask people of other like ethnicities and things, "What are you?" a lot. Like, do you get that question a lot, and how does that make you feel?
Let's see. Well, yeah, you do have some people they're kind of ignorant. They just don't know it. Ask you straight up, like, "What are you?" And then you kind of just answer and kind of like, well, I'm Filipino or something, something. I'm this and that. But then you have like the actual people who do care and are very considerate of your feelings. So they ask in a nicer way. So where's your family from, or what ethnicity are you from? Because you have something, something. But sometimes it's always how do I want to say it? It's very pleasing to hear when people are interested in like where you come from and your background because they want to know more about you. But in terms of just asking someone like, "Hey, what are you?" Like that's just no.
I have the same issue where people are either very blunt about it and they want to be very straightforward, or they're very polite about it. And in certain cases, depending on how they phrase it, either way is okay with me. It's when they start digging a little bit deeper. I actually had a roommate that would just gave me a barrage of questions like, "What are you? Where are you from? Why are you adopted?" Like really intimate questions. I'm like, that's none of your business. But as far as it goes, it is really nice that people ask and that they're curious about you and your different appearance. But at the same time, it's really evasive and sometimes annoying, especially when they make, and I think it's worse than when they make an assumption, or they try and figure out what it is, and it's like, no, you're wrong. This isn't a game show. You're just wrong.
Okay, and we also, I know like pretty much every psychology class that I've ever been in, when we talk about different cultures, they talk about how in American culture it's very independent focused. But I know that a lot of the time they say Asian American culture is more communal, is kind of like a more communal aspect. Would you say that's true or not so true for just the Asian American culture on campus, or does it vary?
I'd say it's a little bit of both. I am first generation American citizen, so my parents were from the Philippines and they immigrated here about about 20 years ago. And back home, it's very family based. So, like you said, communal, and we rely heavily on our family members. Like, you have your family, and they're the ones who brought you up. So that's who's most important besides your husband or your significant other in terms of that. And then coming here and being brought up in this sort of like independent mind of thinking and way of thinking. I have a little bit of both. Like I love my family. I use them as they're my support. They're my rock. But I do have that sense of I want to kind of branch out and do my own things, but still have that family, that support behind me.
I think for me, it's actually, unfortunately, it's the quite opposite. I was adopted when I was about 6 months old, so I have no connection to culture or my real family. And my adopted family is Caucasian. They're a mixture between German and Polish. It doesn't work. I can say that way. In those two cultures. For me, it was. It's a hard question because in the American culture, sometimes you see families that are very, very close, but in other ways, they're only connected through their religion. That makes them a close family. And my family was very much that way until religion kind of fell. It fell away at some point, and then it disconnected. So it's interesting to see those that family is just family for Mel, which I think is great. But for me, my family really needed religion, and they didn't stick to that. So I think, as far as like, do Asian cultures tend to be more collectivistic or rely on the family and support the family? I would think so because that's the people that they need the most. It's not like a god. It's not like anything else. It's each other, which I think is very realistic and it's much more compatible with how they want to survive. I think as far as like family expectations, marriage and things of those issues, that's a little bit different. For me, I have some freedom. My family doesn't really care who I marry, but I don't know if that's different from your family or not. Religiously, I have some expectations, but culturally, I do have that freedom to kind of marry whoever I choose, which is nice.
Okay, my last question is just about like friend relationships, and do you feel like you have a strong community of friends like in the Asian American culture that you can sort of like go to for support in situations where there are issues or anything like that, or do you feel like there's not a very strong community that's supporting you here on campus, I guess? Does that make sense? It's worded weirdly.
Well, back home, there's actually quite a large Filipino community near my hometown, and a lot of my mom's coworkers, they were her classmates back in high school, like all the way from the Philippines, and they all decided to move to the same town and have kids around the same time so that they all can grow up together. So I see that as my definitely my home support group if anything were to arise, but nothing really does because back home it's like really diverse. There's a lot of African Americans, a lot of Latinos, a lot of Asians. So it's rare for anything to happen back home, but here I'm just starting to learn. And I'd say my Asian American Student Association family, the friends that I made since my freshman year, they're kind of my support group, even though we are diverse and we're not all of the same race or the same ethnicity. So, yeah, that's what I have.
I have to agree with Mel as far as this organization has brought me a lot closer to find more individuals who are like myself or in the same situation and finding that community of Asian or Asian Americans. The unfortunate part is that my hometown is completely also Caucasian with like sprinkled one or two Latino Americans and some Black Americans as well. So I don't have that diversity at home, but here I definitely do have much more of a support system of Asian Americans.
Nice.
Alright, mine's gonna be about family, and I don't wanna like be too personal.